Well, good evening, everyone. Yeah, thank you for joining. So my name's Daniel Mansubi. I'm just one of the directors here at Lanescape. Tonight's session is going to be the second installment of our speaker series. So this time around, we're going to be focused more so on the real estate and investment aspect of Laneway and Garden Suites in Toronto. So we'll be covering everything from buying and selling to leasing, maximizing returns. For those who are new to us, because I know not everybody here is joining from our newsletter, Lanescape's a Toronto-based design build firm, so we specialize, of course, in laneway and garden suites. We guide clients through the full process, design, permits, construction, and we've been doing so since 2018 with over 200 completed projects now. So I'll introduce the co-host. So you'll see Craig Race there. He's the founder of Lanescape. Craig played a pretty pivotal role in shaping the bylaws that made laneway housing possible in the city. And then we're also excited to welcome Trevor Bond. So Trevor is a Toronto realtor and industry expert. He's going to share his perspectives on how these properties are performing in today's market, and again, diving more into the real estate side of things. We will open up for questions at the end, so definitely in the chat box below, feel free to drop any questions that you might have. We'll be sure to answer them along the way. I will also note if you're curious about your own property, I know a lot of the attendees have already inputted their address for reports, and I believe the majority of you have received them. But if you're curious and you haven't gotten one, you can email us at info@lanescape.ca with your address. We'll also pop some more info about that towards the end. But without further ado, I think that sets us up to get things started.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks, Daniel. Before we start, we always like to know who's in the audience. So if everyone could let us know your discipline and background, we'll try to make sure we're speaking to whoever's in attendance tonight. Usually it's primarily homeowners that attend, but if anyone is an agent or a builder or an architect, we'll be sure to give you poison pill information so you can't compete with us. Uh, to introduce our guest for tonight, Trevor Bond is an agent at Bosley. He's also a friend of mine and someone who I've collaborated with and worked with for many years. As part of our collaboration, he's become very well attuned to our work in the laneways of Toronto, both for leasing and for acquiring and selling properties with laneway potential, both realized and theoretical. So he's kind of the perfect person to bring into our orbit and help us figure out exactly what we need to know from a financial side, especially when we're considering flipping or leasing up a property. Probably half of our clients fall into the bucket of constructing a home for income. So exactly what kind of decisions you should make and what kind of mind frame you should be in with your decision making is what we hope to learn tonight. So we'll start off with Trevor giving us a little presentation. And as people listen to Trevor's comments, if you do have any questions, you can feel free to throw them in the chat. We might save them for later on, but it'll be good to have those so we can respond. And after Trevor's presentation, he and I will have a bit of a fireside chat to talk leasing and sales. So without further ado, Trevor, thanks for joining us tonight. If you don't mind introducing yourself, go ahead and kick it off.
I think you did a fine job of introducing me. I don't know if I have anything else to add other than thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Craig, for inviting me. This is always a good opportunity. I think the last time I did a formal presentation on Laneway Suites was in 2019, and I went through it, and it was very, very different than it is now. So it's kind of exciting times. Um, So I put this together. I think it will be focusing a lot on rentals potential and other things. So let's what I want to do is talk about today with Laneway Suites. And when I say Laneway Suites, I'm going to be it's going to be synonymous with Garden Suites. Um, what works, what doesn't, and what lasts. Forgive me, I don't have a proper presentation mode, so I hope everybody is seeing this, and we'll see that this turns to this. Is that good? Are we good? Okay,
All
so
good.
that's so far that's good. And thank you. Good night. Um, so again, we're looking at who will be looking at this. Hopefully, I see a few real estate agents, and that's okay. But homeowners, investors, families, hopefully, you'll all be able to benefit from the presentation. If you're building a laneway suite or a garden suite is in your plans, then you are in luck. So, what we're going to talk about today is going through the process. And I have gone through this process myself personally with Craig. I've gone through it, as Craig said, with his clients and with my own clients. I've learned a lot, and I thought this was a great opportunity to put a bit of information together, and so others can learn from mistakes and some of the smart people that are doing what they do in this industry. So we're going to start here. Basically, the why. Knowing why you are considering building the laneway suite is absolutely critical. The why informs the how, the what, and finally the who it will attract. I'm going to be focusing a lot on renting your laneway suite as it is typically the best use. It may not be everyone's plan. We're going to touch on all the different uses or a lot of the different uses. But I'm here to say that if you don't think like a landlord from this moment forward, then you might be undermining some of your future value. Because if you're not thinking of it as a rental, then it's quite likely the next owner of your home will be. So, um, what makes a laneway suite? I mean, this is a totally new product in the rental atmosphere, a biosphere, whatever we want to call it. And they're terrific, right? They have natural advantages over condos and regular apartments. They're basically little small houses, and they beat their competition well. They won't have elevators. They don't have shared space. If we're lucky, they can have an outdoor space, but they provide this quietude and this separation. And that's what tenants are looking for, and that's often what you're looking for as well. So we try and design and plan for this really early on, and I'm going to return to design in general later on in my little chat here. But for now. Let's talk a little bit about rents, and I only want to touch on it. I had slides upon slides of graphs and charts and everything, and I thought, who really cares? Because it could all change. So in 2024, we did have a peak in the rental market, and we can talk about condos at some point, but this is not the time or the place. And then in 2025, we did see a softening. And now we do see more of a balanced market. So there's a lot of tenants out there looking for places, but they can be more discerning. They're not desperate, which is why design matters more now than it ever has. The great thing is that new builds and premium buildings are still pushing the normative rents. So we are getting premium rents. Laneway houses and garden suites are ideal candidates. And they're also a better alternative to units that might be within your own home, like a basement apartment or a third floor unit or something like that. The tenant won't cramp your style. It's not fun to share a roof. It's fine, but this makes life a lot easier. And the more we can keep it separated, the happier you'll be. And there is an old adage, good fences make good neighbors, or tall fences in some cases. And so that's why having that space between you and your tenant is ideal. Again, just another reason why It's great. So let's now talk a little bit about the other uses beyond rentals. So I'm going to touch on them. Um, so the first one is one that I am seeing quite frequently. It's one that my family considered, and it's the downsizing, I should say. It's a time when a homeowner is emotionally ready and not just financially motivated. They're in their community. They love their neighbors. They love their habits. They love their local park. But they don't love the four bedrooms. They don't love the cleaning, the toilets. They just have too much space, and they have other plans and other priorities. They may want to travel more, but likely they want to maintain less. So the laneway suite is the option where they can move into that and rent out their main house. Multi-generational living. It works until life changes. And so if you are planning for this type of use, then plan for the changing of life up front. It makes sense for a family to combine resources. Some cultures are predisposed to do just that. They want to support their family members. They want to help their children be homed. But just remember, life changes. Life is change, and real estate will outlast uh, all best laid plans. Um, and then I have personal use. So this may not be an income producing intention. It might be a lifestyle decision, and that's fine. And one just must be honest about what their intentions are. And they might be very happy having a studio or an office space or spare living space. It may not be an economic decision. But again, we want to consider the resale implications. So I'll talk a bit about that when we get to the exit strategy. So for now, though, still kind of talking about that personal use. I actually, Craig, I think I had a question for you because, and I don't know if you're allowed to chime in, but I can't remember if there are restrictions that if you build a laneway suite, you are obligated to have a kitchen and a bathroom. So its intent is at some point an ADU. I thought that was the intention behind the 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 bylaw changes. Is that am I right on that?
Yes, laneway and garden suites have to have both a bathroom and a kitchen, essentially, in order to be considered a home. If they don't have those things, they fall into a different part of the bylaw that is very different. Basically, a shed is all you get if you don't put
Right.
those things in.
Right, right. Okay. So again, now consider that two-story cinema that you were just about to build. And now remember, it's got to have a kitchen and it's got to have some intention for as an ADU. That's kind of the intention of the bylaw changes. And so either way, in any case, and Craig is not only a partner in this company, he's also an amazing architect. And I would totally, if this is if this is the plan for your use, I would consider retaining him to look at your house, so you can get an addition to your house and get that space, get that use out of your current house. It might be more efficient and more effective. Nobody wants to walk outside in the cold to your laneway suite where you've just built a gym, get all sweaty, and then walk back last winter. So, that being said, let's go to the final use for a laneway suite, which is part of potentially a larger investment play. So we just talked about shifting zoning bylaws, allowing for laneway suites to be part of now a small scale development play. So it's never really been easier converting the main house into a multi-unit, adding a laneway suite, avoiding development charges. So large lots can benefit from severances. So you can develop many multi-units with many laneway suites. So this presents a completely different bird as far as an evaluation perspective. and calculating value based on income, as opposed to the other ways we calculate value. So it's no longer a rental unit, it's a business, which is what this slide is intended to state. Um, so once we fully understood the purpose, your intentions, now we can kind of get to designing appropriately. So we're going to focus on laneways as tenanted rentals. It's the best baseline. So let's start with visualizing our dream tenant. I am going to visualize a dream tenant and call him Biff. Um, so Biff, for example, might need a two-bedroom apartment, and like many condos and laneway suites, it advertises two bedrooms, and one of them is 7 foot square. So Biff is going to be sad if he goes to this place with two bedrooms and one of them is barely a bedroom. And this is speaking to how we can identify the kind of a tenant type that we need in our planned laneway suite. We want to make Biff happy in this case. A happy Biff pays his rent, and won't be tempted by other units. If we have small and tight units, then we are going to have higher turnover. If we have a functional unit, that's going to lend more to stability. So, um, so one of the best things, and again, I'm not going to espouse to be an architect or a designer, but I'm going to talk about, basic theories, and that is that light and flow is are very, very big attractions. And so smart flow from one space to another, lots of natural light, a feeling of space and openness. Wherever you can get it is good. Private views is good. Privacy in general is the reason why your tenant has come to you, your prospective tenant has come to you. So we try and provide that. If we underperform on layout, we're underperforming on price as well. So so I thought I would do a quick aside because this is a question that comes up not frequently, but one every now and again, and that is, oh well, we have the opportunity to excavate under our laneway suite prior to building, and therefore adding 30% more space, and to our two-story unit, and having essentially a three-unit space, which can potentially add 30% more revenue or thereabouts. And so I'm not against below grade. It is going to be much more expensive per square foot to build. I'm sure that there are ramifications that Craig can get into. But I am just going to say that I have seen good below grade space in laneway suites, and I've seen bad space below grade in laneway suites. And so if you want it to be good, make sure that you have a circumstance that lends to it to be good. So hopefully you have a bit more space. If it's a very tight lot and you're just putting that thing on there, don't try and add a lower level, because you need to have space for those light wells. You need big windows to let in lots of light. Um, we want to have, if we can alter the grades so we can let more light in, that's great. We want it to be warm and dry. Um, so if you can get light wells coming in, so window wells and light wells coming in from maybe skylights down stairwells, having wider stairwells, mezzanine landings, high ceilings in the basement, radiant floors is critical so you don't get that dampness. Oh, and then on the contrary, basically, you're going to be left with a dank or space, and nobody wants that. And we can get into what goes down there at another time, but basically, it can be a great space to add to a laneway suite, but generally the rule of thumb is people like to sleep above grade. And generally, if you look at like children's services, if the bedroom is below grade, it's not considered a legal bedroom, for example. So we should think the same way. Um, so now we're getting into the exit strategies. And so we want to avoid rigidity in design and maintain kind of the flexibility of future use wherever possible. So we want to always be thinking, and my wife hates this because she always wants to get some really neat wall treatment or something like that. And I'm always thinking anything that kind of permanently affects the house, like how does that impact the sale? Not that I want to sell my house, but you never know. So your exit strategy may impact design. And we're going to I've got co-ownership or condominiumize. So that's if you have you know if you have completely different exit strategies, that will completely impact your design. So if it's condominiumizing, for example, then you really need to think about your HVAC services and metering and all these things completely differently. But we're going to return to that in a bit. In the meantime, we have Biff. And Biff is just a regular human, and Biff sleeps at night and works during the day. So let's think about how we can provide Biff the best environment. And that's after, most of the finishings have been done and the planning and the layout and the light and the flow. But now let's not just call it a day. Let's put out blackout blinds in the bedrooms. Let's put in privacy shears in the living spaces, and don't cheap out on these things. Don't get things that have a tendency to break really easily because you're just going to be inconveniencing yourself and your tenants. Um, you know, have those finishings, touch hooks, rods, closet organizers, washroom hardware, like a plug in a closet for a vacuum, a web mesh for internet, fire security, all that kind of stuff. Make it a little smart if you can. And then when it's all said and done, clean the hell out of it professionally, have it photographed professionally, have it measured or use the measurements that Craig's team has provided you to generate floor plans that are probably a little bit more marketing oriented than they are architecturally, engineering. Um, don't bother getting a 3D tour, for example, because they expire and have to be hosted separately. So just get all the photographs. You may want to get it virtually staged. That's an awesome thing to have. So now you have your place is finished and you have this inventory of marketing material, basically. Um, so so basically, I'm speaking to the more organized you are, the better the plan is formulated, the more efficient and cost-effective the implementation can be with partners like Lanescape, even from the very beginning with Lanescape to the very end with a realtor, or just listing it yourself, or when you're between tenants, you're all ready to go. So let's talk about what I think is going to be pretty critical in this little chat, which is being a good landlord. Um, so so a good landlord communicates. They'll schedule annual inspections. They'll have an onboarding inspection, maybe an exit inspection. They'll keep on top of their legal notices to protect their position. And one, for example, is a rent increase. These are critical, in my opinion. You have to issue them 60 days before the anniversary. If you lose one day, then you're a month behind. The RTA or the Residential Tenancy Act is very strict, and it's there for your protection and obviously the tenants, maybe a bit more the tenants. Um, but don't begrudge it, work with it. It's not a bad thing if everybody's behaving themselves. It's a great system. Um, so the stay on repairs quickly to protect your tenant quality and have your lease structured properly to protect your exits and everything like that. So for example, in your lease, you should have clauses that permit for marketing periods and showings and signs and maybe photography and make repairs quickly. And now I did mention the N1, and you might say, but Trevor, technically, I don't think we had our laneway rules until after 2018, November 15, 2018. So technically rent control isn't in place. But I am going to say a good landlord does not jump on surges in rents. And does not is not opportunistic and does not gouge their tenant. They just charge a nice, reasonable market rent, and then I would suggest that you use those legal increases and just abide by those rules, and you'll find that your investment is keeping pace with inflation. Um, so here's an important just side note, a little tip. If you have a friend or family member that you're putting in there, and you've given them a lease, this has just happened to me on a deal where a seller negotiated on behalf of their tenant and said, yeah, no problem. They will pay 40% more in rent for you because I gave them a great price, which he did do. Um, in order to do that, there's something called a rent discount. So you should have the rent in the lease at the market rate, and then provide a rental discount, which you can remove at any time. This is a lot easier to manage than managing friends that may get greedy when they find out you're selling or this or that or the other thing. I'm not going to spend too much time on furniture. If you want to furnish your unit, that's fine, but no longer are we into basically a rental. We're into basically a business at that point. So now we planned, we've lived, we've loved, and it's time to move on. So let's review our exit strategies. If you have a rental, oh, sorry, no, this is the rental exit strategy. So if you're trying to exit the property to move on, you may not be in a position, or you may not want to take on the expenses of selling the whole place. So you may want to convert the whole thing into a rental. So this is a like the lowest friction way of exiting, but it's no real exit from the asset. You won't be fully extracted from the property's goings on or from the ownership structure. But it may be an option to rent the entire property, leverage it, and move on to your next plan. You can offload management. There's a lot of management companies now. If it is freedom that you seek, you may want to watch out for capital gains implications. That changes completely in this case. When you have a full rental, it triggers a different tax scenario upon the sale. And so you will want to get an appraisal as soon as you make that move. And you may want a young, optimistic, ignorant appraiser so that you're exposed to fewer taxes later on. If you're considering short-term rentals or anything like that, again, that's more like a business, and watch out for HST implications and have a really good understanding of the RTA so you don't get into squatters and all that kind of stuff. It can get interesting. Um, so now the other exit strategy, another option is just to sell it. So list and sell. And this is where being a good landlord pays off. If you have a good tenant, good rents, nice unit, it's photographed floor plans, you're kind of ready to go. Um, I will again a reminder to be careful about including undertakings in your agreement of purchase and sale. Keep your tenant apprised of everything, and let them know their rights, and let them when I'm selling a property with a tenant, I'm right there for them, and offer services to rehome them if they get evicted by the new buyer and stuff like that. A seller cannot evict their tenant, period, for the purposes of selling a property. That's just a fact. So don't do it. You can do keys for cash if you want. Cash for keys, cash for keys. And then just prep your house. Then you've got all that's left over. Your laneway house is good. And then just prep your house, and just take into consideration your real estate fees and maybe mortgage cancellation fees if they may apply. Okay, co-ownership. I don't know how I'm doing for time. I can spend less time on co-ownership and condominiums. I can kind of skip by them, or I can quickly do these. How did we feel?
How about a medium pace? We've got more slides to get through, you and I, after, and more discussion. So as much time as you think.
Okay, so let's let's talk about it because it's interesting. We'll talk about it really quickly. Selling, if you have co-ownership or like fractional ownership, and you go to sell fractional ownership, this is terrible. Okay, that's going to be my bottom line. It's a terrible idea. At least write into your contracts and everything like that that you like what your exit strategy is going to be. Give it some time where everyone lives together and is happy, and then you may have a shotgun clause. You might be able to buy each other out, but there's no scenario where you're selling fractions of a property. You're either selling the whole thing or someone's buying someone out. Okay, how's that? That's quick. And these advanced options are we're getting back into these developers who might be severing. And this is way more complex. There's capital gains and HST implications when you're oh, well, there is a concept of severing your laneway suite. It's happened, I believe Craig and I can only find two occurrences where it's happened. Again, so we're not going to delve into it. It requires service agreements and lots of upfront planning. And then you're triggering DCs or development charges. Similar planning is required for condominiumizing, but also way more in the design element. You've got common elements, amenities, metering costs. Legal fees, legal fees, legal fees. Have I mentioned legal fees, declaration docs? So you potentially see higher returns if you start selling off your fiveplex in pieces. Um, but I am just going to say, based on my research for this, curb your enthusiasm because I've seen, basically they're not worth as much as you think they're going to be worth. That's the bottom line. People are making money. They're making money, but they always go in thinking that they're going to be that dragon with all the gold in that movie. I forget it now. And then the other option for an exit strategy is again is to refinance, is to if you've got a rental at good rates and you've generated a new higher value for the property in its best use, we can use a cap rate. It'll be appraised at a higher value, and you just pull out equity, borrow against it, and move on to your next project. Um, Boop. So. Um, That's how you can basically make it work, having a clear purpose, a good design, a proper management, a planned exit. These are all kind of essentials. And if you want to do more with your property, maximize its potential, then all of this is kind of constitutes my advice. I can say with certainty, those who have suffered in this market often have proceeded to build these things without checking all these boxes. So basically, let's try not to disappoint Biff is my last one. And then we have the Q&A is I'm going to hand it off. I hope I covered a lot in a short period of time. I feel like I talked a lot.
Well, interesting insight, Trevor. I think why don't I share some of my slides because I think there's some information we try to include in these, and also um, I kind of want your perspective on a few things. Glad you have this up though. So before we get into that, call to action. Why should I call you? At what point do I call you?
I mean, look at there's no bad time to call me. I mean, I've talked to your clients when they're just thinking about uh, plotting different things, and I that's a great time to call me. Um, and if you're going to sell, obviously you call me. If you're leasing, I should have, I believe on our call is Natasha, who is my lease expert on my team. And she and I do a lot of leases together and we do a lot of laneway suites. So we understand how to pitch those and the benefits of those, how to position those in the market. We understand their value. And then if you're buying, which we haven't really talked about in this presentation, I apologize. Because it's a little different, but I will say that if you're buying, then of course reach out to me. But I will say when I list properties, I always go to there's a link on Lanescape, and this is a nice plug, but it's a fact that this is really a very useful tool in my toolbox. And I have generated for properties that I'm listing, and I use it as not a schedule, but as an attachment to my listings. It's the report that you guys, a free property review that indicates what you can build, how you can build it. It kind of talks a bit about compliance issues or what might require further investigation. And it is so awesome that you can see how many square feet you could build in a maximum square foot. I mean, I can't tell you how often that comes up. There's more questions about it. And I do it for the houses that we're looking at buying for the agents that haven't produced those. It is a free tool, so for the agents that are online right now, there's no reason why you shouldn't be generating these. And so, yeah, and I bought a lot of lots, tear down lots. I mean, the spec building business is a little lighter right now, but there are still people out there that understand with all of these incentives that are taking place that it's a great opportunity. Smaller scale is where a lot of builders are putting their money right now.
Yeah, great. Well, that's helpful. Why don't you stop sharing and I'll pull up a few here. Um, okay, here we go. So, um, just a sec here. So, a few notes. That was really helpful, Trevor. I think at this point, I kind of want to take it back to basics a little bit. We have some general information about laneway suites and garden suites I always like to remind people of. And I also want to walk people through the design approvals process and get your insight on how things work through this too, Trevor. But for those listening, you know, if you're somewhat uninitiated or you haven't thought about some of the elements of laneway housing, there are a few things that make it different from a typical house. The first is that generally it cannot be severed. As Trevor mentioned, there have only been extremely rare cases of severing them onto separate parcels of land. So they typically belong on the same property as the main house. You can condominiumize them, but that's slightly different than a full severance. And the reason for that is because the services for the laneway suite and garden suite usually come from the main house through a trench in the backyard. It's important to note these are what's called as of right. So your neighbors don't really have any input into them as long as you follow the prescriptive bylaws, which is fairly easy to do. The vast majority of our projects go straight to permit. They do not need minor variances. It's a very easy bylaw to work with. They're exempt from development charges in basically all cases. Even if you have a sixplex in the front of your property, laneway suites and garden suites are still exempt from development charges. For those who don't know what DCs are, when you build a new unit of housing in Toronto, generally the city essentially taxes that. It usually costs 60 to $80,000, sometimes more, for a new unit. That does not apply to these. I was going to say a portion can be rebated of your HST when you're constructing it, but as of just this week or last week, 100% of your HST in pretty much all laneway and garden suite projects gets returned to you at the end of the project. We have a future webinar coming up with an HST expert, so stay tuned for more info on that because it is emerging. There is no parking requirement for them. That's actually the case for all small scale housing in Toronto. So you can choose to provide a parking space to the ADU or to the main house or to neither. You have flexibility on that. And it's also worth noting that developing your backyard does not affect the development potential of your main house. They are viewed separately. So if you do intend to tear down your house one day or put a big addition on it, that will be subjected to the same bylaws it would with or without a backyard ADU. So they are really designed to be flexible for a lot of circumstances that you'll find yourself in. Uh, we've been mostly talking about people who fall into the supplemental income bucket, but our clients do tend to fall into three different buckets, all of whom can use Trevor's advice, I would say. People who rent out their units are our primary clientele. However, we do have a lot of clientele that are interested in multi-generational housing or interested in personal use space, like a home office or entertainment space. One thing that's worth noting is that usually people that fall into the multi-generational or the live work bucket will eventually end up renting out their suite at some point in the future, or a future owner will, like Trevor mentioned. So that's why insight from a real estate agent or some other objective third party during the design process can be useful. Trevor, you've talked to many of our clients in all these circumstances. Right off the bat, do you find like there's a difference in the decision making that goes into your laneway suite design depending on which of these you fit into?
Um,
No, good. Next slide.
well, I mean, in some ways, I was speaking to this a little bit. You really should be trying to focus on like an exit strategy. Usually, yes, they have completely wildly different ideas of what they want from their laneway suite. But just like aerodynamics, you should be trying to work towards the best use when you go to for your exit strategy, is my opinion. So just don't do something at the expense of something else. You can putting partition walls in later is fine, but put some junction boxes in to prepare yourself for that. If you want one big open space, that's great, but if you've got enough square footage, plan for that. If you're doing multi-gen living space and you've got all these rooms and there's so many small rooms that are fine because everybody's fine with a 7 foot by a 7 foot square bedroom, then have that one partition wall be easily taken out. Lay your flooring under that wall, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, good. I don't think I've ever had a client want a 7 by 7 bedroom, but maybe one day.
I'm
So,
seeing them too. I'm traumatized.
and in Toronto, we do have two categories of accessory dwelling unit. Laneway suites are the bylaw and the typology that apply to any property that abuts a laneway. Pretty straightforward. The key differentiator between a laneway suite and a garden suite is that laneway suites do not require side yard setbacks. So they're designed to really fit into the consistent row of garages you'll typically see on a laneway. Whereas with a garden suite, you usually have side yard setbacks, as well as other provisions that just really open it up to more of the space around the rear yard and set it back from your neighbor's open space that's usually adjacent to your footprint. Both of them are similar in their build form, but I find there is a trend in their use. Typically, laneway suites lend themselves very well to third-party rentals, whereas garden suites lend themselves well to multi-generational housing. I think the reason for that is that the public realm of a laneway really makes the laneway house feel like a separate home on a separate street. Whereas with garden suites, you have to walk through the front yard's personal space to get to the garden suite. Trevor, do you have any experience with garden suites yet, or have you only worked with laneways so far?
I've had experience with garden suites by indicating where they can be built, and for my buyers, because we were very restricted with laneway suites, and so it has opened up a whole new opportunity for a ton of different buyers. So but I have yet to have them. So there are buyers that have built with the intention, I've sent them to you, of building garden suites. And so I am seeing that now, of course, almost, well, probably as much as laneway suites, but
Mm,
they're more for their personal use. Studios, uh, art studios, music studios, that kind of stuff.
hmm hmm When it comes to the bylaws, they're fairly similar between the two typologies. The permitted height we can construct to in Toronto is 6.3 meters. That usually allows for a 9 foot ceiling in your living spaces and an 8 foot ceiling on your bedroom floor. The separation from the main house is usually 25 feet. That's for a two-story structure. You can reduce that to 5 meters if you have a single-story structure. There's a setback requirement from the rear lot line. In the case of a laneway, that's 1 meter. In the case of a garden suite, it's usually a little bigger, usually a meter and a half. And like I mentioned, laneway suites don't need side yard setbacks, so they can go lot line to lot line up to a maximum width of 8 meters. But in the case of a garden suite, you usually have to have side yard setbacks that are equal to about 10% of the lot width, give or take. There are different circumstances where that requirement changes. There are a few other bylaws, like laneway suites can be slightly bigger than garden suites. Maximum gross floor area for an as-of-right laneway suite is about 1,700 square feet, plus basement if you want. For a garden suite, it's limited to about 1,300 square feet, plus basement if you want. An important factor to consider is your emergency access. The city has prescriptive methods on how you can provide access for fire, police, and ambulance. If you are on a laneway, you can use the laneway. There's a limitation that you have to be a maximum of 90 meters from the end of the lane. And in either a laneway or a garden suite case, you can use your side yard. Now, that's something that can get a little tricky. The width requirement for your side yard access between your house and your neighbor's house, if you use that, is 0.9 meters or about 3 feet. That has to be entirely on your property. So from the face of your house to your lot line has to be 0.9 meters. If that space has to bridge onto your neighbor's property, that is possible, but you need your neighbor to sign what's called a limiting distance agreement. That's essentially an easement that registers that clear space to say the city of Toronto can have access through your mutual side yard to access the suite in the case of emergency. So that's something you want to check fairly early. It's something we usually help people with. So just as an example, this is a project on a laneway we did in the West End. It was within 90 meters of the end of the curb and within 45 meters, which is a second measurement, to a fire hydrant. The theory with how this measurement works is a fire truck is going to pull up to the curb on the street. Fire trucks cannot go down laneways, so they have to stay on the main street, and they have a 90-meter hose to get to the door down the laneway and a 45-meter hose to get to the hydrant. In a case where we're using a side yard for either a laneway suite or a garden suite, those distances change slightly. The distance from the truck to the hydrant is still limited to 45 meters, but from the truck to the front door of the suite reduces down to 45 meters as your maximum distance. I don't know why. Apparently, when the fire department goes through your side yard, their hoses are shorter or something. The process you're going to go through is something that I always encourage having a real estate agent in your corner early on. Like Trevor mentioned, talking to him before you even initiate a project is a good idea. As part of your other due diligence you should be doing before you start a project is getting one of Lanescape's free property assessments, of course. One important factor that we provide in our property assessment is like we don't just give you the developable area of your backyard, but we also check your site for red flags, things like conservation boundaries, potential trees, access to fire hydrants, elements like that that can basically stop a project in its tracks. A limiting distance agreement is a good example where we want to make sure that you do have clear emergency access. And if you don't, you get your neighbor on board to sign an LDA before you start, because they can just completely squash your project if that's your only option. Once we're into the design process, at our office, we have two different approaches. We call them pre-designs or custom designs. So our pre-designs are a catalog of pre-engineered houses that are essentially ready to go in for permit. Our goal with those is to limit design optionality, but rapidly increase timeline to putting shovels in the ground. We do still allow for full customization of the facades, including material selections and different facade treatments. So every one of them appears unique, but the bones behind them are fully pre-designed. Trevor, like we specifically designed these to really appeal to kind of the broadest segment of the market, like essentially a rental unit that is optimized for resale or for personal use. Um, I usually find the optimal user for this would be a developer or someone that really just is focused on efficiency. rather than someone that's looking to do something custom. But these kind of apply in all cases, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, no, I think they're very valid for people who are just trying to optimize their property. They know that building a laneway suite is going to be a great way to optimize their property and get income. And so, as long as it's hitting all the buttons, these are tried and true designs and layouts. So, if it's the people that are using it for personal use or have personal input into it, those are the people like me that get fussy.
Hmm.
And
But of course,
they can be their own worst enemies, like me.
but of course, we do have most of our clients design their projects from scratch. The advantage of that is that although it takes more time and costs more, you can optimize for every cubic inch of available space on your site. Um, when you go through a custom process, that's really where having someone like Trevor as a sounding board can be helpful. Obviously, we try to give input as to what the market will want or what's going to be right for your family. But Trevor, like people often call you to get input during this stage of design, don't they?
Yeah, and I usually don't give them input as to what they want, what their family wants. Quite often they have that exactly in mind. I look at how that's going to impact future value, how that's going to impact resale.
Hmm.
So that's usually where I start raining on people's parades.
Good. Well, and once the design's complete, permits obviously are a necessary step. To contextualize the timeline difference between a custom design and a pre-design, our custom designs, we target about 6 months from the day you hire us to the day permits are issued, and you can break ground. A custom design, however, we try to target 2 months, and it's possible to work faster on that. It kind of depends on a few things. Once design is complete and permits are in hand, starting construction is obviously your final step. Trevor, I don't think you're too involved in this, but there are some decisions you have to make when you are considering execution on the site. I mentioned that services have to come from the main house. It is possible to run them down the side yard or external to the main home. That's usually more challenging in most site cases. However, if you are looking to condominiumize your laneway suite, for example, or you do have one of those unusual cases where you can sever, really planning out your utilities to be separate from the main house becomes critical. So your use case will factor into our plan for how we service the ADU. In
Can
most
I actually
cases,
just can I jump in just for a second?
please.
Because where I do come in is when we've got buyers that do want to have a laneway suite, and we get your report and it's all positive, but then you go into the basement and the basement has been dug out and it is $1 million basement. It's just the most fantastic basement in the world, and I'm the one that has to come and say, and all the services are at the front of the basement, and so I'm sometimes I say, if we can't go around the outside, then this is going to get ugly, and all of this nice finished space might get hurt. But this is the way to do it on the outside, along the side.
Indeed. And yeah, it's the service trench is fairly straightforward. Usually we find the first month of construction we're disrupting the main home, but after, 4 to 6 weeks, we've closed up the trench, we've patched up your main house, and we fence off the site so that all the impacts is isolated to the backyard as much as possible. The majority of our projects are slab on grade. So the reasons for that are simple economics. It's fairly expensive to construct a basement, but it is possible to construct a basement. To quantify that, we find adding a basement will usually increase construction costs by about $250,000. The way I contextualize this to my clients, and Trevor, I want you to tell me if I'm right on this or not, is the only circumstances where it makes sense to build a basement are when you just have too much money and you want to park it in Toronto real estate so that your kids can inherit it one day. Because 30 to 50 years from now, this will be cheap space you're happy you would have constructed. The other scenario is for a personal use project. So if I'm building this for my wife and kids and I to move into, I'm going to build a basement because I don't care what it costs. I'm just going to pay the mortgage and be
Yeah.
happy I have somewhere to store my hockey equipment and Christmas tree. Do you think that's
I find,
appropriate?
I find that the people that build the basements are doing it because they're on site. They're the developers that have all their equipment on site and they've just dug a big trench from beginning to end. It costs them very little more less. They're not retrofitting a site or anything like that. They're just developing the site from scratch. And that's virtually the only other place is one of your clients who had a very clever idea. Uh, and and it's a beautiful basement. But I know that like because it's a rental and they were thinking maybe they had a separate stairway down to it. They had an idea to keep it for themselves and again, best laid plans, right? So it's best just to I think I'm with you is if you don't really need it, it's a big expense unless you've got money to burn.
That is a good point too. Often our clients will want to put a basement in so they can make it a second unit in the laneway suite or have a second unit through some other means. It's important to note the City of Toronto does not allow second units in accessory dwelling structures, which is a little frustrating.
But would this be
We have
personal use? So if they wanted it for that basement would be for their personal use and they were renting the upper, that you can't have two uses in one space. Is that right?
So the main house can have space in the laneway structure or garden suite,
Yeah.
but it can't have a second kitchen,
Right. No,
essentially.
that's what this one had, for example.
Yeah, so there are municipalities that allow that, like in Vancouver. We've actually approved a couple two-unit laneway suites before. I just had a two-unit garden suite approved a couple of weeks ago.
It's one
But
on
they're
Altonton
extreme.
somewhere.
It was on Coxwell near Queen.
Oh, okay.
But they're extremely rare. You basically have to have an unusual lot circumstance to justify the planning rationale for it. And even the one that just got approved was refused at Committee of Adjustment and only got approved through an appeal, which is extremely time consuming and expensive. Um, when it comes to construction, basically hire someone with experience is my best advice. There's very little area for staging materials. You want to keep excavation to a minimum if you excavate at all. Overhead wires and trees are constant impediments. You need to have construction managers and subtrades that are familiar with these spatial circumstances and are ready to roll with the punches because most trades and most builders are not equipped to handle the tight confines. Um, there are a lot of decisions that go into your house in terms of its performance. The Ontario Building Code requires exterior insulation on custom homes, which we follow. Our clients that have ambitious sustainability goals will increase the amount of exterior insulation and focus on air tightness to really achieve outstanding comfort and energy efficiency. But even if you're just meeting code minimum standards, the OBC is very good in terms of its performance requirements to create a very comfortable home. Windows and doors are something that I also find reflects your use case. Generally, I tell people if you are using your ADU for your own family, you want to maximize glazing facing the main house because I want my laneway suite and my main house to be connected and share the backyard. Whereas if I'm designing it for a third party occupant, I want as little glazing as possible facing my backyard and a lot of glazing facing the laneway or someone else's backyard. Um, Trevor, that might go contrary to the future of a third party renting it. So you have to be
Well,
pretty committed if you're
this is kind of you do have to at a certain point you can't do everything. You have to and and you know what? You can still have everything face the backyard, and then at some point you build a fence and you give them a little backyard of their own, and they're as happy as a clam.
fair enough. In terms of fit and finish, again, focusing on your use case and your neighborhood, I would say is important. If you're putting tenants in your space, you want to focus on durability and simple, easy to maintain finishes and fixtures. if you're putting a loved one in there, or it's a personal use space, or you're in a neighborhood that can generate extremely high revenue, then maybe you want to invest in some more luxuries. But one of the things I love about laneway suites and garden suites is that they really are expressive. Like you can design them to be traditional or contemporary. You can match your main house. You can contrast it. You really have a lot of flexibility. We have a lot of clients that are embedding flexible use spaces into their suites. So like garages that open into backyards as indoor outdoor party rooms, you name it. A lot of our structures will incorporate parallel parking spaces off the laneway so that you can keep a car on the site without having to dedicate an entire garage space to a car. This was a project we did in the East End where three adjacent property owners decided to construct at the same time. So we were able to do like three attached laneway suites all at once. Really, like the possibilities are endless. Um, I love working on it personally. Trevor, I'm sure you do too. Although they're small, they are mighty, and the flexibility that they provide is really an interesting challenge for architects and real estate agents. And it's something that, I think really makes a difference to families and to investors. And they're really a rewarding typology to work on. So I think why don't we leave this slide up and maybe take some questions from the audience? I've seen a few stacking up here. Daniel, do you maybe want to filter through them and start giving us a few?
Yeah, we can kick off with one here. So Helen has some questions just around insurance. She's wondering whether, perhaps insurance companies would decline to insure these types of construction as rental properties.
I don't know why that would be the case. So far, I've never heard of anyone having issues with it, especially because accessory dwelling units have become a familiar product to lenders and insurers and any company. Uh, so far, it's straightforward.
Yeah, you just have to advise your insurance company, just like you would if you were doing a major renovation or a pool or anything like that. You have to let them know what's changed and how it impacts the insurable property as a whole. But your tenants should also be providing a liability insurance, and I would be asking for their own contents coverage as well.
Thank you. Enrique just wants to hear a bit more about the advantages of a traditional build versus a prefabricated build, which nowadays seem to be advertised as cheaper or higher standard products.
Oh, you know what? I have a lot of experience with people who think that they're going to get a prefab, and there's a lot of them out there. And whenever, I mean, all of those people have ended up with custom builds. It's a very tough promise to put a prefab in the city. I mean, if we're all out in, North York or something where we can drive a crane through and don't have the wires and all these other issues with laneways, then that's fine. But in the end, I have yet to see them successfully deploy more efficiently and more cost effectively. I honestly, I haven't seen one prefab. I've seen the container one, um, which was a little hard, like a little had, let's just say, design constraints. Um, but I would say, be wary that they're going to be they make big promises up front, and then it gets more and more expensive as they look at your site and get into it.
Yeah, our pre-designs were kind of a response to prefabricated competitors. We actually looked at a lot of prefabricators to build our houses in the past. And essentially what we found is that you can construct them cost competitively, but in order to do that, you actually don't comply with the Ontario Building Code. You go through, it's called like a CSA approval, which is essentially the same approval you use for mobile homes. And the construction quality you get out of CSA approved, like prefab ADUs, is really terrible. Like it, will have a much shorter lifespan, way shorter, way lower insulation values, comfort problems in the winter, moisture management problems. We decided that it was not a responsible way to build. When you compare like site construction to OBC quality prefab, the argument to that is that OBC prefab, you're saving time because you can build it off-site and just tilt it up on site. When we did the math on that, we found we were saving a few weeks, like maybe a month, maybe two if you're really lucky, on your construction timeline. Well, our projects take 6.5 months to construct. Like saving a month or two off of that is not much in the way of cost savings, but the construction cost to prefab goes up appreciably. So it does not make sense from an economic standpoint to pursue it. That's why we site build. Also, our pre-designs will cut 4 months out of the design and approvals process. So if you just go with a pre-design through us, you're ahead of the game in terms of timeline compared to a prefab solution.
Thank you.
So don't hire anyone else. Hire Lanescape.
Robert is wondering in general, how much does a garden or laneway suite bump up your property taxes?
Mm. Good question. I don't have the stats on this. I know it's definitely not incremental to the cost of the
No,
build.
not at
Like, for
all.
example, if you have a $1 million main house and then you construct a $500,000 ADU in the back, it's not like your property taxes go up by 50%.
Mhm.
It's like a very marginal uptick compared to the value creation.
Yeah, it seems to fall between like 10 to 20%. It just comes down to the assessment.
So, what is that in numbers? Do we know, Daniel, like $1,000 a year or something increase?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at like, let's say a $5,000 annual property tax, then you're looking at like maybe 500 to $1,000 increase a year.
If
There
they
you
catch
go.
it. Sometimes it'll take years. And then you can
Yep.
always fight it.
Tia is just wondering if we can provide a bit of a an estimate on budget for a build. Is there any price per square foot estimate?
Yeah, for most of our suites, like a two-story suite, we see construction cost. What do we see, Daniel? 400 to $550 a square foot, somewhere in
Yeah,
that range.
I would say a hard cost, it can range from 350 to 500. That's your construction hard cost. That's not inclusive of HST or management fees. It'll obviously vary on the size of the build, but there's also other factors taken into account, the materials we use, the finishes that we select. We obviously make an effort as well to design to the budget that you set out.
Yeah, our like lowest cost projects, like single story, one bedroom suites, are usually about $300,000 hard cost. A lot of our two-story, two bed, two bath units can be between five and 600,000. And we like a max size, four-bedroom laneway suite, no basement might be in the 700 to 800 range. It does vary substantially though, based on fit and finish. Quick note on your mention there, Daniel. HST exempt now. You get 100% of your HST back now
Yeah,
in
Crazy.
almost all cases.
definitely worth flagging that. Helen is one, or sorry, there was another question from Helen. Helen is wondering, can we assume a laneway suite or garden suite will trigger capital gains when you eventually sell?
I mean, it depends. If you've rented it out to a third party, it will on the portion of your property that was a rental. Also, talk to a tax consultant prior to starting the project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
Uh,
case with all rental units, by the way. Like I have a house where I put a basement apartment in it, and the government changed the rules. So now I have to pay a capital gain on the portion of the home that is the rental unit if I ever sell it. That was not the case historically, but several years ago it got changed.
Tom Tran would just like us to explain the process of the service connection between the main house to the ADU. And then also if we have any credible builders for these types of projects we could suggest.
Well, we build our own projects. So if you're looking at credible builders presently, I think, so we are a design build company. Technically, we're two companies, an architecture firm and a construction management firm. Um, so generally, if you hire us to do the design, we want to be the builder as well. In terms of the service connections, it's very site specific. Pretty much always your sanitary, like your sewer line, has to come from under the basement slab in the home and go straight out the back wall. Electrical and gas, usually we can branch off at the meters that are on the side of your house and either take them down the side wall and into a trench or down the side yard or through the basement. We have a little more flexibility with that. The water supply usually gets fished through your basement somehow behind the drywall and then out the back wall. And then from there, it goes through a service trench. Your water and sewer has to be minimum 4 feet below finished grade, and electrical and gas is 2 feet below grade.
Great. I think that might do it for questions for now.
There
Uh,
was a question about multiplexes somewhere. Where did I see that? Share a few words about planning for a fiveplex and exiting via CMHC's MLI Select takeout financing. Zoning required in Toronto, duplex, laneway suite, etc. So we talked a bit about duplex laneway suites. In terms of multiplexes, anywhere in the city of Toronto, you can build a fourplex and a laneway or garden suite at minimum. If you're in a Toronto East York ward, so not Etobicoke, North York, or Scarborough, you can build a sixplex and an ADU on your property, theoretically as of right, as long as you have the space for it. The CMHC ensures financing for those types of projects, which have very favorable rates. And because the threshold for CMHC MLI Select is 5 units, anywhere in the city of Toronto now, you can develop a multiplex that meets their minimum unit threshold and use CMHC either for construction or just for your takeout financing. And if you're looking to do that, give me a call. Anything to add to that, Trevor? Are you familiar with that debt insurance product?
I'm familiar with it. I usually my clients are up on that. I'm I'm just about the dirt.
Well, one interesting factor about MLI Select is the unit type you incorporate will dramatically affect your evaluation. So we're finding our clients want 3 bedroom units
Right.
or small, like studio 1 bed units, um, because you can fit a lot of studio 1 beds, or you can get really high revenue for 3 bed units if you are doing a multiplex laneway suite development.
Yeah, and I'm always going to be a larger is better kind of proponent. I think that there's a lot of products out there for studios, but they do attract more transient kind of in and out. There's going to be higher costs for real estate fees and damages. Not that they're going to be damaging things, but just the in and out, the high turnover. So, you know, if you have a choice, I'm a big fan of larger units. They're usually people that want to stay in a property for a longer period of time.
Great. I think we've got one last question here. So David is just wondering if we can speak to estimates of the soft costs. And when he says soft costs, he's referring to the pre-design, the custom design, really the design and permitting aspect.
Sure. So at our firm, architectural fees for a pre-design are $10,000 and for a custom design are $30,000. Um, that's a pretty simple answer for a relatively multi-step process. So when we draft a proposal, you'll see that we work to fix fees and we have a list of deliverables that you basically pay for as you go. So some architecture firms will just charge an hourly rate. Um, and there are a wide range of fixed fees you can negotiate from firms. I find that we're generally in the middle, but hopefully the best. There are other soft costs to consider, like application costs with the city, um, things like servicing costs, etc. Daniel, what do we normally advise our clients to assume for their costs for everything up to permit issuance, like architect, surveyor, mechanical structural engineer, application costs, arborist, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's dependent on the lot, I would say. Like Craig said, there's going to be different services for different properties. I mean, a survey on average, you're looking at probably around 22 to $2,800. Everyone's going to require a new topographical survey. If you're getting an arborist report, then you're probably going to be around $1,000 just for the report. Tree removal is a different story. Engineering is an additional consultant cost that's incorporated on a custom design. Our pre-designs are pre-engineered, so that's not something that you actually have to worry about. We get the stamp for you. So it can vary. Permit fees will also be dependent on the size of the build, anywhere from like $1,000 to $1,500. So additional costs, I would say, can be anything from just a survey and permits to upwards of $10,000, depending on the additional consultants you might require. But again, that's something that once you start the process, we tailor a report to your property, and then we're going to better gauge exactly which third parties or consultants you'll require. We got another question about multiplexes, if you got a moment here, Craig. So Tom is wondering, can you provide service to design a 5+ unit for MLI Select program? If so, what is the cost range?
Yeah, so Tom, I sent a message back. Send your address to info@craigrace.com. Lanescape, I should clarify, is purely an ADU design build company. But I have a separate architecture firm called Craig Race Architecture, very creative name, that handles multiplexes as well as other architecture. So send that over and we'll give you a property assessment for a multiplex as well.
Great.
There's also a question from Tia about the metering, separate metering on hydro, Enbridge, and water.
You can separately meter hydro and gas very easily. So Toronto Hydro and Enbridge. It's very challenging to submeter water. The City of Toronto does not have a submeter solution. You can get third-party water submeters, but generally you just don't submeter that one. It's included in the rent.
That's right.
All right. Well,
Okay.
looks like
Thank
that's the
you.
end of the questions. Want to say a big thanks, Trevor, for joining us. And obviously, I hope people reach out to you for this.
Yeah, well, either way, I'm glad I could help. It's impressive to see so many people stick all the way through the presentation, so I'm grateful for that. And I always learn something when I do these, so thanks again for inviting me.
Of course. Thank you for joining. So you've got Trevor's information there, everyone. If you do want to reach out, Lanescape's info as well. I'll quickly note this. I know a large portion of attendees had submitted requests for a property assessment. I believe we just got through really the last of them today. So if you haven't seen it, check your email inbox. You'll have an assessment. It'll indicate what you can build, and there will be a link in there in the email if you do want to book a free consultation just to kind of talk through it a bit more.
Oh,
Just in case anyone's confused, Trevor@trevorbond.ca.
no, there's
And
two of us actually, one for each personality.
Daniel, remind me who our next expert is in the next series
So our next
or
two
the
series are going to
topic.
be, yeah, so our next topic is going to be around financing. And the following topic is going to be around HST rebates, which is going to be, I think, a hot topic, especially considering the most recent changes.
So stay tuned to our newsletter for info on that. Thanks, everybody. Hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.